Our story begins on a hot day in apartheid South Africa, with our protagonist Amina, an Indian woman, helping around at her cafe. She's fixing the cafe's banner when a sergeant's car haphazardly parks by the front, smashing a plant pot on its way. The reason for Sergeant Stewart's visit is shocking. He's here to inform Jacob Williams, an employee of the newly opened cafe, that there have been some horrible new laws put in place. Those laws are discriminatory, to say the least. Black people are now prohibited from eating in the same places as non-black people. Since they're in an ethnically Indian neighborhood, they need to refuse service to black people. This type of discrimination, known as segregation, is a core practice in an apartheid state. The sergeant asks the diners for their passes, but one lady only possesses a travel permit. Though Stewart, wanting to talk further with the lady, seems to be on the more patient side, his colleague is anything but. He makes a tumultuous entrance into the cafe by shooting the ceiling with his pistol. Before he makes his exit, he threatens the cafe owner, promising the end of his life if he continues to serve black people. When they're gone, Jacob goes to a white diner's table. He tells the woman, Madeleine Smith, to leave without paying. She runs the post office, which he visits often, and recognizes him as a regular customer. She also knows the cafe owner, Amina, who he works for. They discuss how it would be illegal for Jacob to be Amina's business partner, given the discriminatory laws in place. Still, it's obvious that he is the co-owner of the cafe. After she thanks him for shielding her from the police, Jacob goes up to Amina and offers her some comfort after the sergeant's troubling visit. Our next scene introduces us to our second protagonist, Miriam, who is also an Indian woman. It's a busy morning for her. Her kids are about to be sent off to school, and her husband is having breakfast before work. Her husband is displeased, and we quickly find out that he wishes to move out of their current neighborhood, for reasons that are currently unknown to us. Miriam seems to be pregnant, if her hand on her stomach is anything to go by. Despite her clear need for rest, she's scrubbing the floors once her kids are off. Her friend and sister-in-law Farah enters the room, informing her that they can go out for lunch. Their trip brings them to Amina's cafe. It must be the first day at the job for one of the waitresses, as she loses balance of the plates and breaks them in front of Miriam. Seeing the commotion, Amina quickly strides up to Miriam and begins to take care of the mess. Their first instance of eye contact is charged with a sense of familiarity. Do these two women know each other? Judging by the look on Amina's face, she seems to want to start a conversation with her. Unfortunately, Jacob comes up to Miriam and Farah's table and starts talking about the menu. Though Amina won't be their waitress today, it doesn't stop her from glancing at Miriam from across the cafe. The pull Miriam has on Amina is evident as she walks up to her with the sample donut, not even sparing a glance at Farah. Miriam is a fan of the sample, and Amina, grinning, agrees to get her a full plate. Farah is not impressed by Amina's demeanor, saying that she seems to be full of herself. Miriam defends Amina, saying that she should be proud of owning a business as a non-white lady. Though Amina is a stranger to her, Miriam seems to have a sort of fondness for her already. At the very least, she respects Amina's work ethic and passion for her cafe. Farah is having none of Miriam's defense. In fact, she insults Amina further, saying she has a masculine appearance, referring to her casual hair and outfit consisting of a dress coat and trousers. She also says Amina doesn't fit in with the rest of the Indian women. The comments do nothing to sour Miriam's image of Amina. Miriam steals one more glance at the woman from the other end of the room, and she's met with a kind gaze and an even kinder smile. It's time for Miriam's family to move. Her husband, Omar, secures the furniture to his car before getting in and driving away. He seems hopeful about their future house, and reassures their kids that they'll be going to a better place. His promise, however, doesn't seem to hold any weight. He drives them out to the middle of nowhere, parking in front of a decrepit house. Miriam is immediately concerned with the area he picked out, and the look on her face shows it. It's a good thing the inside of the house looks nicer than the outside. A few months seem to have passed before we next see Miriam. Though the neighborhood is as desolate as ever, there is an apparent change in the size of Miriam's baby bump. She's probably due soon. Back at the cafe, Amina is staring at a photograph she keeps on the wall. It's of a woman holding a baby. Jacob comes up to her and reassures Amina that the woman would be proud of her. It's a touching moment that shows that Jacob is there to support Amina and fill in the affection and care she lost when the woman passed. Miriam is back at home, pale as a sheet, as she lays on her bed. Omar tries to offer some comfort, but it seems like Miriam just wants to get the birth over with. Mrs. Benjamin, who seems to work at the house, brings her some tea to help her state. When Omar walks into the garage, he's met with Farah, who instantly saunters up to him and starts a conversation. She tells him that no one's around, there's no need for him to worry. We quickly realize what she's trying to do when she grabs his suspenders and leans in for a kiss. He succumbs to her seduction, despite his very pregnant wife in the next room over. Before they part ways, Farah tells him to stop by her place the next time he visits Cape Town. The look on his face seems guilty. If only he felt guilty enough not to cheat on his pregnant wife. When he enters the kitchen, he sees that his kids got home from school. He sits them down at a table and asks them to do their homework. Mrs. Benjamin saves him from his awkward attempt at parenting when she enters the room, announcing that Miriam has given birth to a beautiful baby girl. In the next scene, we're at a train station where we can clearly see the evil of segregation play out. A sign on the wall clearly designates specific parts of the station to non-whites. However, despite being grouped into the same category, an Indian lady complains about black people. She tells her son he should come home, and we soon come to learn that she is Amina's paternal grandmother. After complaining about how Amina won't be able to find a good husband in this place, she asks her son why Amina didn't join them. He tells her she's busy working in Cape Town. She continues her pestering when they arrive home and begin eating their dinner. She tells her son and his wife that she knows a family Amina can work for. Before her son can say anything about that, the old woman says Amina has a duty to obey them. It's nighttime when Amina visits the house. She's stopped on the way by the wife, judging her for the clothes she's wearing. Amina defends her choice of dress, saying that's who she is. Unfortunately, Amina's attempt at self-expression is hindered by the wife, who quickly puts her in a pink dress. The older woman is talking about how modern women are more progressive these days, and the conversation is awkward, to say the least. Another lady there asks Amina how many children she would like. When Amina says she wants 3 children, boys or girls, the older woman is appalled that she doesn't want only boys. Fortunately, her stance is defended by another man at the table. Back at Miriam's home, Omar tells Miriam that he'll be visiting his sister Ramat in Cape Town. However, Miriam knows that Ramat is in Paris, courtesy of Farah. Omar tells her Ramat is coming back with her husband. Suspicion gets the best of Miriam, and she picks up the letter Omar left on the table. Whatever she finds when she spares a quick glance at the letter must have worried her. She hands it to her husband when he returns to the table, and he leaves without a word. We're at Farah's house now. Her husband greets Miriam and Omar as they enter the dining room, Miriam's baby cradled in her hands. Omar asks about Ramat, and Farah's husband says she went to a hotel to meet a man named James. Apparently, James's father is at the end of his life, and Ramat wants to support him through it. Omar thinks it's a risky move to see him. James is a white man, and if Ramat is caught with him, they'll both be put in jail. Before we can find out more, Ramat walks in with James, who turns out to be a white man, and her husband. She greets Miriam with a kind smile. It seems like it's their first time meeting each other. Ramat talks about what it was like moving from home, and Miriam shares her condolences for James's father's illness. She asks him if he's afraid of what would happen if he, a white man, got caught with Ramat, an Indian woman. Apparently, James is an idealist who always wants to look at the bright side of things. Omar, on the other hand, is more of a practical guy. He wants to get a hold of what he can, whenever possible. As Omar speaks, Miriam takes note at the similarities between Ramat and Omar. She jokingly says they could be twins. Her statement is met with silence across the table. Apparently Ramat and Omar are, indeed, twins, a fact unknown to Miriam. It's shocking that Omar hasn't told Miriam about it. When Miriam asks Omar why he never told her, Farah butts in, saying men never tell anyone anything. The comment obviously upsets Miriam. At this point, she probably believes that Omar is having an affair with Farah. Ramat tries to defuse the tension, suggesting a visit to the local cafe. Miriam takes her up on the offer, and Omar and James join them. Upon entering the cafe, the four take a table to themselves. They look over to see Amina dancing with one of the waitresses, a sight that amuses Ramat. She compliments Amina for owning a business at such a young age. Omar makes a comment that is oddly similar to the one Farah made about Amina. He says Amina isn't like the rest of the Indian woman he knows, pointing out her curly hair. Ramat asks him if he thinks Amina is part black. He points to the framed photograph we saw earlier. Apparently, the woman in the picture is Amina's grandmother, and she's holding Amina's mom in the image. Allegedly, Amina's grandmother had relations with a black man, which would make Amina 1/4 black. Ramat isn't having any of his racist remarks. She says that one day James's family will also accuse her children of being half Indian, but Omar says it isn't the same thing. His cognitive dissonance runs deep. After that terrible conversation at the cafe, our next scene brings us to Maid Lane's post office. Jacob walks in with a smile on his face, ready to send off his letters. He's greeted with a white woman sparing him a bitter glance. He lines up behind another black customer in the segregated non-whites-only zone. To his surprise, Maid Lane points to the whites-only zone and tells him she'll serve him there. He's thankful for her refusal to abide by the racist state laws. Back at the cafe, Amina is serving the table some drinks. She's telling them what she loves about South Africa. Though Ramat is the one engaging her in the conversation, Miriam watches her like a hawk as she talks. After Ramat expresses her distaste for the country, Amina turns her attention to Miriam, who has now taken off her coat. Amina brings up the donuts Miriam had last time, asking her if she's had any better since then. Omar comes back to the table then, asking Amina if she knows anyone who can build a vegetable garden. She says she can do it, despite his insistence that the garden be big enough to produce crops to sell. She stands her ground, saying she'll do it, and promises to come over early the next day. Miriam is delighted by the news, to say the least. Next morning, Amina arrives at Miriam and Omar's residence. The kids and Omar still haven't left for school and work, and they meet her at the front door. Miriam's son asks her why Amina is wearing trousers, and Miriam says it's because she works outside. Miriam orders Robert, their cook, to make some food and tea for Amina when she starts working. Omar drives off just in time for the bus to arrive, and Miriam tells the kids to greet Amina. When the kids leave, Miriam quickly starts to prepare lunch for her and Amina. She brings out some food and drink for Amina to indulge in, and the other woman thanks her warmly. They have a fun chat about cooking, and Amina asks Miriam to join her for lunch before she can go back inside. Amina says she wants to get to know Miriam better. When Miriam says she's a simple housewife, Amina argues that she has thoughts, feelings, and wishes like everybody else. The thoughtful sentiment surprises Miriam, and she tells Amina she's never been greeted with such kindness before. In fact, Amina was the first person to smile at Miriam in 8 days, a fact that troubles Amina. Amina is done with her work for the day by the time the sun starts setting. She enters the dining room, sliding Miriam a book of poetry over. Miriam confesses she hasn't read anything in a long time. When Amina starts making her way to leave, Miriam first insists on having dinner together. When Amina refuses, she doubles down and tells her to stay the night. It's dangerous driving around in the countryside, and she doesn't want Amina to get hurt. Amina obliges, and after Miriam tucks her kids into bed, she makes her way to chat with the other woman. Amina is sitting outside on the porch, asking her where her husband is. He works late in Cape Town, she says. Amina asks to clean up, and Miriam leads her to the bathroom before retreating to her bed. Before she knows it, it's late, and she can't sleep. Amina walks in on her having some tea in the kitchen, catching her off guard. Amina pities Miriam for the hard work she does around the house, saying no one looks after her in return. Apparently, Miriam came to South Africa after getting married 7 years ago. As they start talking about work, Miriam asks Amina if she ever plans on getting married and having children instead. Though her question is asked out of curiosity, not judgment, Amina gets slightly bothered. She says she can do both if she wants to. Yes, it would be unusual, but neither Amina nor Miriam are usual, she notes. Amina says her odd ways and drive for independence were inspired by her grandmother, the woman Miriam heard those rumors about. Amina discloses the entire story. Her maternal grandmother was 19 when she was She had already had one child by then, and the her with another pregnancy. That second child she gave birth to was Amina's mother. When they realized Amina's mother was from a man who was not her husband, they beat her within an inch of her life. They attempted to send her and the baby away, but the baby was snatched by her husband on the train ride. Miriam is deeply upset by the story, and she offers her sympathies. She understands now why Amina is reluctant to get married. She does not want to be oppressed in a marriage. However, that's not the only reason. Miriam seems to understand what she means. Before she can say something, Miriam hears her newborn cry in the other room, and quickly leaves to take care of her. In the morning, Amina is still there. Since Miriam slept in, Amina made the kids breakfast and school lunch. Miriam is shocked, in a good way, at Amina's domesticity and the help she offered. Amina apologizes for the harrowing story she told her last night, but Miriam says it made her think, and she thanks her for it. The next time we see Miriam, she's in bed with Omar, and she's reading the poetry book Amina gave her. Omar is put off by her newfound hobby. He tells her he was busy in Cape Town, and under her breath, Miriam asks if he was with Farah. The test works to confirm her suspicion that he really is having an affair with her. It's an awful thing for her to realize, but the poetry that was so kindly supplied to her by Amina offers her comfort. Later in the day, as Miriam does some work in the house, she is rudely approached by two sergeants. They lead with a disrespectful grope, which shocks Miriam. They want to ask her some questions about her sister-in-law, Rimet. She tries to redirect the conversation by talking about Farah, her other sister-in-law, but they see through her bluff. After further they demand that she tells them where she is. She quickly runs to the children's room, noticing that her newborn is not in her crib. The sergeant threatens her further. Since mixed marriages are prohibited, Rimet and James will be sent to prison. Miriam's attempts at protecting Rimet count as withholding information from the law. Thus, her children will be taken as a penalty. The only way she can bring them back is by telling them where Rimet is staying. During this extremely stressful situation, Miriam can only prioritize the well-being of her children, so she tells the sergeants where her sister-in-law is staying. Later in the evening, there's a wedding happening at the cafe. Rimet crashes it, telling her the police are after her. Amina takes her to the side, telling her she can't keep her at the cafe. If the police start questioning them, at least someone will give her up. Instead, Amina takes her to her house. You can always count on her to do the right thing. Meanwhile, in Farah's house, she's also being interrogated. She doesn't give up any information, but she gives them a lead on who can tell them where Rimet is. To no one's surprise, Farah's information leads them to Amina's cafe. They begin their search around the cafe, barging through the rooms without a care in the world. They're certain they'll find Rimet somewhere around the cafe. Having had enough of Amina's denial and supposed cluelessness, one of the sergeants slaps her harshly. He's quickly escorted out by the other officer. He closes the door behind him, reminding her that he can shut the cafe down anytime. He continues the interrogation, this time with more careful words and questions. Meanwhile, at Miriam's house, a neighbor stops by and asks for help with his car. He hit a black man on the way and needs a change of tire. Amidst the distraction, Miriam quickly makes way to leave, attempting to find the man he hit. The man is in a dire state when she finds him, and amongst the harsh winds, she tries her best to offer help. He's scared and wary of her, and he leaves before she can do anything. When she makes her way back into the house, Omar asks her where she went. He doesn't buy the excuse she makes, and when he notices the blood on her clothes, he strikes her. He says her place is with him, not with black people. She's left defeated and scared when he takes his exit. Her situation is terrible, but not at all uncommon. She's trapped in a marriage with a dangerous spouse, whom she cannot go against without risking her life. The next morning, Robert brings Miriam a box full of her old books. Despite the horrific night she endured less than 12 hours ago, she's delighted by the sight of the pages. She quickly jots down some notes on a wrapped book. She hands it to Robert, asking him to take it to the post office. When Omar enters the room, they share nothing but hateful looks. At the post office, Jacob is asked by a white man to fetch him some water. Madeleine quickly steps up, offering the glass herself. He's disrespectful and awful, even as he makes his way out, to say the least. Madeleine complains about the state of the man and people like him, before telling Jacob she has a package for him. It's the book Miriam sent. Jacob hands it to Amina once he gets to the cafe, and she quickly realizes it's a gift from Miriam. She's touched by the kind gesture. Back at Amina's mom's house, she's receiving news about her granddaughter. Apparently, the family she's talking to aren't willing to marry their son to Amina, as she wants to focus on her business instead. To say the news upsets the old woman would be an understatement. Once her son makes it into the room, she demands he call for Amina and an ambulance. The son doesn't buy her health concerns, telling his wife to just make her some tea. However, the son's judgment may have been misguided. Soon enough, her daughter-in-law realizes she has passed. We're now back at Miriam's house. They're having a conversation about the passing of Amina's paternal grandmother. Miriam thinks they should pay their condolences, but Omar has no respect for her family. When Miriam reminds him that Amina saved Ramat, he angrily throws a booklet in Miriam's direction. Later in the evening, we find out that Omar agreed to Miriam's proposal, despite his reluctance. The men and women separate between the living room and kitchen, and Miriam sets out to find where Amina is. She finds her reading in her room, and Amina is happy to see that Miriam is here. Amina says her refusal to marry, as well as her outfits, are what brought about her grandmother's passing. Though they obviously didn't get along, she seems slightly shaken by the loss. Trying to lighten the mood, she asks Miriam if she approves of her outfits. To her delight, she says she likes them. In fact, she prefers it over traditional clothes. Amina says she doesn't like traditional clothes either, but she needs to appease her grandmother's soul. Miriam tells her it shouldn't matter what others think. At that, Amina asks Miriam who she's appeasing by marrying Omar. Miriam admits that she had no say in the arrangement, during which Amina notices the bruise on her face. Miriam deflects the subject, saying Omar wants to thank her for saving Ramat. Amina tells her she did the right thing by standing up to the police. Before they go back downstairs, Amina decides to change her clothes. Miriam watches her through the door, forcing herself to avert her gaze once she takes her dress off. She asks Amina why she took the risk by taking Ramat in. Amina says it's because she hates apartheid and oppression. Before she makes her way out of the room, Miriam tells her she wishes she could be more like her. As the other woman leaves, Miriam brings a hand to her lips, as though yearning for her kiss. The next day, Amina is at the cafe, telling Jacob she has an idea. She wants to add Indian food to the menu. When he asks her who will do the cooking, given the rest of the chefs don't have experience with the cuisine, she tells him not to worry about it. Next thing you know, she's at Miriam's home, offering her a cooking position at the cafe. At first, Miriam is stunned by the offer, but after some deliberation, she declines. She has the shop she runs out of her house to take care of. Amina says she only needs to come in once a week. Miriam comes up with more excuses. She has her children to take care of, and her husband wouldn't agree. Amina tells her she's disappointed. She thought Miriam had some courage in her. Much to Miriam's surprise, Amina knows that she tried to help the black man who got hit by her neighbor's car. Apparently, the man told Amina himself. Omar interrupts their conversation, and Amina tells him about the offer she made Miriam. Miriam tells him she rejected the offer, and Omar rudely tells her that Miriam doesn't need to work. Miriam can't drive anyway, he says. At that, Amina tells them she can give her driving lessons. They agree to driving lessons, starting next week. Later, Miriam plates Omar some breakfast, telling him he has a long day ahead in Cape Town. She's not wrong. The next scene shows Farah taking a hot bath. She walks out of the bathroom, and when she sees the back of her husband, she thinks she's talking to Omar. She quickly takes back her words of him being early, asking him what the matter is. Her husband tells her the store is closed because of the demonstration the Africans are holding. After their short conversation, Farah's husband spares her a suspicious glance. Omar has made it to his brother's house. He walks through the door like he owns the place. He makes his way through the dining room, failing to notice his brother sleeping on the chair. When starts calling for Farah, his brother rouses from his nap, asking him what he's doing there. Farah pretends she doesn't know why Omar is there, and the two quickly get on the same page. Meanwhile, at Miriam's house, Amina has just arrived to teach her how to drive. After exchanging charged looks, Miriam gets in the passenger seat and starts her lesson. During the lesson, Amina tries to point out the car parts, but Miriam already knows them all. Surprised, Amina asks if she asked for lessons simply because she wanted to see her. Miriam doesn't deny it. As they talk, Amina brushes Miriam's hair out of her face, a sweet gesture. Omar has made it back home, and he's quickly informed by Robert as to where the two women are. As he makes his way there, Miriam and Amina are sharing a quick kiss. Miriam shakes after it's done, overcome with nerves. Omar appears right after they break apart, and Miriam is worried that he saw them. Fortunately, he didn't, but he isn't happy regardless. He demands that Miriam gets out of the truck. Amina tries to make conversation about his day, but Omar is as rude and impolite as ever. As Miriam and Omar walk back inside, he tells her he needs to talk to her. She calls him off for his rude behavior these days, saying she's the one who should be rude to him. At this point, he knows that she's aware of his affair. He tells her it's over, he won't be seeing Farah anymore. Miriam simply asks him why he did it, but he can't give her an answer. Meanwhile, on the road, the school bus has just arrived. She tells him he hurt her, just in time for the kids to run up to her. Back at the cafe, Jacob tells Amina about Madeleine. He asked her to have dinner with him. The older man seems to be the only one with a prospective love life at this point of the movie. Instead of being happy for him, Amina asks him about the logistics of being with a white woman. He can't take her anywhere but the cafe for dinner. Jacob shares his frustrations with the apartheid. He's lived by the segregatory rules his entire life. He doesn't want to end his life alone because of them. Amina understands, but she doesn't know if it's worth chasing feelings that might end in disappointment or heartbreak. Jacob encourages her, saying she's his biggest inspiration to chase his dreams. The words light a flame in Amina's heart, and she immediately makes her way to Miriam's place after work. When Amina arrives at Miriam's place, the latter understands that she didn't come to give her a driving lesson. But when she approaches her, Miriam rejects her. She hesitantly sits down on her bed, telling Amina that she can't be involved with her like this. Not only is Miriam married, but Amina is also a woman. Amina says those aren't good enough reasons to give up on love. Miriam says those facts still matter to her, despite the care she has for the other woman. Amina asks her why the real reason for her rejection is. Miriam confesses that every time she sees her, she wishes she would stay with her forever. It frightens Miriam how much she likes Amina, but Amina is willing to be the brave one. She lays Miriam down on the bed, urging her to shut her eyes and going in for a kiss. She tells her that for the next few moments, nothing exists except for them. As lovely as that would be, they're interrupted by her baby's cry. The two quickly split apart, and the situation dawns on them. They have to make a decision now. Amina tells her they can leave, but Miriam reminds her that she has 3 children and stops her from saying anything else. They have no possibility of a future together. Amina knows she's right, and with one final, tragic kiss, she storms out of the house. It's some time after, and the sun has set already. We're at the post office, where Jacob is helping Madeleine out with the lock. A policeman, who saw the unlocked door when he was driving by, asks her if everything is fine. When he spots Jacob, he tells him that he can't be standing in the non-white section. She tells him he's the driver, and the policeman buys it. Jacob is rightfully displeased by the treatment he is facing at the hands of the law. Meanwhile, Amina is at her late mother's house. She's packing her bags when her dad enters the room. They have a friendly relationship, evident by the kind words and looks they share. He asks her how she's holding up with the loss, and she tells him her life has been complicated lately. He tells her he knows all about her life. She's always been the talk of the town. It's then that we find out that he knows about Amina's sexuality, as she talks about her past girlfriends. This time, there's rumors of her being romantically involved with Miriam. She says it's not right for her name to be out there. Just because they're friends doesn't mean Miriam also likes women. Jacob has made it to Madeleine's house, fulfilling his job as a pretend driver. Madeleine apologizes for what happened. When she invites him inside, he tells her that he can't accept. He doesn't accept for her to drive him back home either. It is perhaps now, more than ever, that Jacob realizes the extent of the injustice that he is put under. Back in Amina's room, she's talking about her future plans. Before he leaves the room, her father tells her not to go. If she goes, how will Miriam know where to find her? At Miriam's house, Omar has just come back from work. Miriam tells him the decision she made. She's going to learn how to drive, and she's going to work 2 days a week. Omar doesn't accept it. He says he won't allow his wife to work. When she brings up divorce, he loses it and throws a tantrum. He flips the table upside down, alerting their son. He tells Miriam his decision is final. Whatever he says, goes. But Miriam holds her ground. She says she'll decide for herself from now on. And when he stands up to hit her, she doesn't back down. Standing straight, she looks him in the eye and tells him he'll have to try harder if he wants her to listen to him this time. The last scene takes place where we started, at the cafe. It's early in the morning, and everyone is getting ready for their shifts. With a loud bang, we're alerted of Miriam's arrival at the place. She clearly still hasn't gotten the hang of driving yet. Amina is surprised to see Miriam, expecting it to be the sergeant from the beginning of the movie. The two women strike a deal. Miriam will work at the cafe for 2 days a week. And if it all works out, it might even turn into something more.